and welcome to the Joy of Cooking podcast. Each week, we set the table for a discussion about recipes and stories from the authors of The Joy of Cooking, Kitchen Victories, and Misadventures, and most importantly, what we are cooking and eating right now. We're glad you've joined us at the table today. I'm Shannon Larson, home cook, ardent Joy of Cooking user and fan, and snack board enthusiast.
I'm Meghan Scott, co-author of the 2019 edition of Joy of Cooking. I'm a food editor by day and avoider of dish duty by night, and cabbage is my love language.
I'm John Becker, fourth-generation co-author and steward of The Joy of Cooking, America's oldest family-run cookbook. Despite cooking together in the same kitchen for over a decade, I still run into Meghan, but it's usually her fault.
We were talking about this last night, how, we've been together since 2010. We cook together all the time. I've cooked in restaurant kitchens, so you have to know how to move around people and have really good spatial awareness. But whenever we're in the kitchen together, we're constantly colliding.
I do think that my husband and I are the same way. And I can cook in the kitchen with one of my best friends. We don't touch each other. It's like a ballet almost. And then my husband John's in the kitchen, and it's a nightmare, and I want to kill him.
I feel like an implication is being made that this is actually my fault.
Spatial awareness, John.
I think maybe it's just because we have no boundaries now, so there's less concern about it. I don't know.
Well, maybe that's really romantic.
I'll be in the middle of making something and you're just like, oh, it's time to put away the dishes.
Because that's what you do first before you even start cooking.
1,000%,
and when you disrupt the order of operations, then somebody has to come in and remediate the situation.
Oh my gosh. I'm sorry. I'm so Team Meghan right now.
I lost. I admit.
Shannon, what have you been cooking this week?
Well, we spent the weekend on the coast with some friends of ours, and the reason I mentioned snack board enthusiast is I love a snack board. Mm-hmm. It's just really fun to put together. The guys were all playing a game, and I was just in the kitchen making it pretty and fun, and I included canned trout, of course, with crackers and Mama Lil's peppers and dill and creme fraiche, and then radishes with butter and dates and nuts, and I don't know. I love a snack board. And just sitting in a cabin, and it was pouring. There was a torrential downfall on the Oregon coast, but it was so cozy.
That's so weird.
I know. Weird, right? But the fire going and lots of snacks and games, it was really great.
That sounds really nice.
It was really nice. What about you two?
Not so much cooking related, but we had a couple days of really nice weather this week. It's definitely fall, spring. It's not going to last, but I took the opportunity to prune our apple tree, which was in desperate need. So I feel good getting that checked off the list.
Well, and we also took the opportunity to make the cocktail that we had as the recipe club assignment, the Chan Chan, which, is kind of a summary. It's a little off season. It's got cucumber, it's got basil. So kind of a summary thing, but luckily the weather did cooperate.
Yeah. I loved it.
Speaking of cabbage being my love language, we ate this amazing cabbage dish at a restaurant called Jeju. It's a Korean restaurant in Portland. And I can't remember all the elements. I tried looking it up. It's not on their website right now. But it had these, it was charred cabbage. I think they did it they have a wood-fired oven. I'm pretty sure they did it in there. But charred cabbage and then these cubes of really crispy house-made pastrami. Oh my God, it was so good. I've been thinking about it all week.
Definitely on board with that cabbage dish as well. Speaking of cabbage, we did the Haluski. So what is it? Egg noodles, and then slowly cooked cabbage and onions with a lot of butter. And I think we ended up using a bit of gochujang.
Yeah, I added a bunch of gochujang. Not enough. I would add more in the future, and more cabbage, honestly.
Well, yeah, I think it was a Savoy cabbage, so it ended up really kind of melding into the dish more than a more substantial cabbage variety would.
Yeah, it started out really fluffy, but then it shrank to nothing, and I wanted more. But
what do you serve that with? Or is that
what did we serve? We served it with chicken.
Yeah,
thighs.
we did a pan roasted chicken thighs, where pan roasted as in you actually start it in the pan, skin down, then turn it over and do it a little bit more on the stovetop, and then stick it in the oven. Really like the skin when you do that.
The crispy skin.
Yeah. It was a 425 oven, so you get the fat rendered in the pan. It's nice and efficient. And then it gets crispier and crispier in the oven.
That sounds so good.
We would like to welcome Meghan Splawn to the table. We're so excited to have you on the show today, Meghan. Meghan is a writer and a content creator who has worked in food media for almost 20 years. She accidentally got her start in food television when she joined Alton Brown's Culinary team right after getting a baking and pastry degree from the New England Culinary Institute. You might know her work from her years as food editor for thekitchen.com or from the award-winning podcast she hosted, Didn't I Just Feed You? Meghan now works as a writer and content creator for outlets like Simply Recipes, Serious Eats, and Better Homes and Gardens. Welcome to the table, Meghan.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's such a treat.
What have you been cooking this week that you're thinking about or that you really loved?
Well, this is so funny because you assigned these to me via Simply. But I've been cooking a lot of Ina Garten recipes lately, which I'm not like a huge Barefoot Contessa fan. So it's funny to come to her work through her memoir and the storytelling of her life. So this week we did her panko crusted salmon for dinner one night, and that was a huge win, especially for my 10-year-old, and surprisingly delicious and easy. I don't think of Ina necessarily always as easy cooking. And you had mentioned in the assignment, you're like, is Ina a little unhinged for trying to cover the salmon to rest for almost 10 minutes with the crispy bread crumbs on there? But they actually stay crisp. So that was really
nice.
good. And then also her Parmesan chicken, which is just like a classic chicken cutlet, standard breading procedure of flour and egg wash and then seasoned breadcrumbs, but with a little bit of Parmesan in there. But my kids also love that, and I feel like that will be on repeat.
Awesome. Yeah, I noticed. I get your Substack newsletter that you write about meal planning, or basically what your family eats every week. And you mentioned the Parmesan chicken and how, Ina Garten calls for like these very petite sized chicken breasts that are basically impossible to find in the real world. Like, where are these tiny chickens coming from? But I loved your trick of just buying like two bigger ones and then cutting them in half to make smaller ones.
It also makes it so much easier to pound them out too, right? You're cutting them in half anyways. So yeah, where are those little chicken breasts? I don't know. I've never.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of, typically like chef written recipes will be calling for like a tiny 3-pound chicken. Yeah, I would like to know about where they find these mythical chickens.
I mean, I think the chefs get all of the tiny chickens because when I worked at a restaurant, we would get these very petite, beautiful little chickens, but I've never seen them in the wild,
Yeah, I also think that's a locally sourced thing for Ina. That's what I think.
Sure.
She has a chicken farmer who's raising chickens out in pasture. They're not being raised to have these ginormous meaty breasts. And so they have those like nice petite, which is good for Ina, but for the rest of us who have to make it work with the grocery store, there's some little tips and tricks there.
Yeah. Tiny chickens, but she always calls for extra large eggs.
Yeah.
So I'm a little confused.
Do you remember when we had access to like not a Cornish cross chicken? What was it? Freedom Rangers, I think was what they were called.
Freedom Rangers. So chicken breed.
So good.
Yeah, those were great. We were buying them from just a local farm that was raising them. Cooking an heirloom variety of chicken, or is that what you call it? Heritage variety of chicken.
That sounds right.
Very different from cooking grocery store chicken.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to move into our tasting segment. Meghan, I'm sorry that you can't be here to taste.
I'll just be jealous over here. It's fine.
But we are, so our theme this week is canned pumpkin. You have a recipe on your website for pumpkin biscuits. So our producer made your pumpkin biscuit recipe for us to taste since it's very on theme.
Compliment. I love that.
So we have the biscuits here. And John made a special butter to go with them. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. It's a compound butter. You take a dry stainless steel or cast iron or carbon steel skillet, no oil, just dry. Then you put, I think I did, for 1 stick of butter, it was 3 scallions with the greens removed and 1 serrano, and then just put it on medium heat and turn them every now and then until they're nice and charred on all sides. I seeded the pepper, then minced it all up and added it to the butter because I thought that would be good with, kind of a counterpoint to a sweeter pumpkin biscuit.
I'm going to try half without the butter and then half with the butter. I'm surprised you took the seeds out.
Well,
I mean, it's a little unlike you.
Yeah, I'm a seed guy.
Just for the heat purely, John? Is that why you like the seeds in there?
Oh, I typically do remove seeds. My go-to salsa recipe, I'm usually charring 2 serranos and a habanero for like maybe a quart of salsa. And usually I'll remove the seeds for that as well, just because I want to be considerate and I don't want to necessarily outspice everybody else who's going to be having the salsa.
You have outspiced people many times before, and so this is a learned thing that we now have
That's
to
what
take
I
the
was
seeds
trying
out.
to get to.
I mean, how else am I supposed to learn?
And Megan, these biscuits are wonderful. What inspired you to make this recipe?
Oh my goodness. I think that is such a long time ago recipe on my website. I did not grow up in the South. I grew up sort of like in the Pacific Northwest. My family's from Vermont, so I spent a lot of time in the Northeast. And so when I moved to the South to work for Alton, I became a little bit obsessed with biscuit baking. In part because Alton would be like, I would have to make his biscuit recipe for things, whether it was like staff lunch or a TV appearance, and I never quite nailed it. Of course, the thing that I learned later is like he was comparing them always to his grandmother's biscuits, right? Like that was the gold standard for him. And I was never going to get it because I didn't have that muscle memory yet or the arthritis that she had in the later part of her life. So I spent a lot of time making biscuits, like the first 5 years of living in the South. And then I married into a Southern family and it became this thing where I really had to have good biscuits and I really had to make good sweet tea. And so I just have had so much fun in the last 15 years, like playing with the format of the biscuit. It's kind of a blank canvas. You can make it sweet. You can make it super savory. I think for the kitchen, we developed a ranch biscuit at one point in time and played with like pretzel flavored biscuits. During the pandemic, once I made a pizza biscuit, like made a giant biscuit, cut it into triangles. It had like Parmesan and Italian seasoning and garlic powder in it. And we put all this like sun-dried tomato and cheese on it. And then people were so mad because I never shared a recipe for it. I was like, sorry, I just made this kind of ad hoc at home and I couldn't tell you how to recreate it. But I think it's fun and it's something that I feel like ties me to being in the South and my love of baking and pastry, but also, I don't consider myself Southern, which is a very funny place to be in.
My mom would make biscuits only occasionally. I think she had a lot of biscuit insecurities. Like they wouldn't come out the way she wanted them to come out. But there's a lot of pressure because, like my great grandmother would make these giant pans of biscuits for her large family. And, that was the bar that was set, was those biscuits. And so it's just kind of impossible to live up to. And there's no written recipe for any of this. It's just, she just made them by sight or by feel. And I think it's hard to, as a beginner biscuit maker, it's hard to get to that place of just where it's muscle memory and you're not overanalyzing everything.
So what was your grandmother's biscuit like? Is it tall and flaky or like soft and tender? Somewhere in between?
I actually don't remember my great grandmother's biscuits. She wasn't making them as much when I was little. I think she had made them when like her kids were growing up. But I always loved my mom's actually because hers were on the thinner side, but they were crispy. Like the bottoms were really brown and crispy. And I also just love that there are different types of biscuits. Like I think a lot of people see the real flaky, tall biscuit with the layers as like the epitome of the biscuit. But there's also the really soft, pillowy, tender ones that aren't flaky. They're just beautifully like, they're kind of cloud-like. But there's different kinds of biscuits, and I think they're all delicious.
Yeah, and they're really fun. Did your mom bake hers in a cast iron skillet then to get them like really crispy on the bottom? Mm-hmm. That's so much.
Yeah, I think that's my favorite when they have a little bit of that texture on the bottom.
Right? It's almost a little bit could be overbaked, but it's so satisfying to eat, especially with butter and jam. If that's how you like them, like that contrast is so good.
Yeah, Paul Hollywood might say they're overbaked, but I think they're just right.
I'm not necessarily taking Paul Hollywood's advice on Southern biscuits.
No. So I just want to recap really quick. Our recipe of the week last week was the Chan Chan cocktail. I hope everyone enjoyed making that. As a reminder, if you didn't hear last week's episode, The Chan Chan is a new cocktail in the 2019 edition. A couple of our friends actually created it, but we loved it so much that we added it. And it has cucumber, basil, gin, and elderflower liqueur and lime juice. And Shannon actually came over last night and we had a cocktail hour and we drank Chan Chans.
Yeah, it was a great excuse to just have like a 5 o'clock cocktail hour on a Saturday night before the recording. It was great. Also, we had a sunny day in Portland in March, which is very rare. And so it was a nice way to like end a sunny day with a nice sunny cocktail. And I think what I liked about it too is that I think you can use different kinds of basil, different kinds of cucumber. And so the flavors can change over time depending on those two ingredients alone.
And changing up the gin, I encourage people to do that.
Yeah, you can use any gin.
Yeah.
So I'm excited. I think this will be our summer cocktail.
Nice.
We try to have a theme every summer.
And then this week's recipe, we are asking folks to make Joy's sweet potato biscuits, but using canned pumpkin instead of the sweet potato. That recipe is on page 636. And if you want, you can also make, based on John's description earlier, you can make his charred serrano and green onion butter to go with the biscuits.
I mean, I'm thinking it pairs pretty well.
It does. It goes really well. You also mentioned putting New Mexico green chili, like roasted chilies in the butter, which I still think that sounds awesome.
We have a bunch of frozen roasted New Mexico chilies. You were totally on board with me using those instead because we have so many. But yeah, they would have been really good in this.
Yeah, I think also honey with that combination, like the spicy sweet would be really nice. So yeah, if you make the sweet potato biscuits with pumpkin, please let us know. You can tag us at The Joy of Cooking on Instagram, or you can use the hashtag Joy Scouts. Have fun baking biscuits. All right, Meghan, this is the part of the show where we will interview you casually. But my first question, what is your relationship with Joy of Cooking? Like, was this a cookbook that you knew growing up, or did you just hear about it when you were an adult?
Yeah, this is just such a good question. Actually, Joy of Cooking is kind of important to my childhood in a weird way I hadn't thought about until I was prepping to come on this episode. I used to tell the story of like, I got into cooking because my mom was a single mom and I was just like really tired of eating Hamburger Helper because that's all she had time and money to make. But I also have this like very distinct memory of one of the many times that we moved because my mom was like putting herself through college and then through graduate school, and we moved a lot like into student housing and out of student housing. Is one of the moves there being like the empty pantry and Joy of Cooking was the only cookbook that was in there. And I feel kind of terrible that I told the story for so long of like my mom being a terrible home cook. And that's why I started cooking, because her mom was the very like classic. She had a victory garden. She canned everything. The basement shelves were lined with her green beans and her pickles. And she kept 2 chest freezers like full of Cool Whip, but also like fresh blueberries that she had gone to the local farm and picked. And she would fry donuts every time we would visit. And her recipe is like really special to me. And I got to write about it for the kitchen at some point in time. But I think there was like this struggle for my mom that I think she wanted to be the kind of home cook that her mom had been. But being a single mom and like having to provide for her family, she didn't have time for that. Mm-hmm. So it's very sweet. I'm like, try not to get emotional about it. But one of my gifts when I left home to live on my own was my own copy of Joy of Cooking. And then professionally, it continues to be like one of the reference books. Like anytime I'm trying to develop a new recipe. When I worked for Alton, it was one of like 5 books that we went to all the time. And he had many of the editions in his library. So it'd be fun to go sometimes and like see how recipes changed over time. And yeah, it's still something that I reach for, maybe not as regularly to cook from or bake from, but when I'm developing recipes or thinking about a recipe, I'm like, oh, how would Joy approach this? Because it's often the most approachable way, or it's been researched, or it's like really rooted in technique. And so it's generally incredibly helpful.
Yeah, it's really good. I mean, that's how we use it a lot as a reference.
Starting point.
Yeah, a starting point, or just to refresh my memory on something I've forgotten, like what's the ratio of, I don't know, eggs to oil and mayonnaise, or, stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
I love how many of our guests so far on this podcast have really found their relationship with the joy when they leave home and start cooking for themselves, especially in college. I feel like that's something that keeps coming up, and it's just really, I don't know, it's really special.
Yeah, it's really sweet. I mean, that's how I came to it as well. I've
Yeah.
talked about this before, but I did not grow up with joy of cooking. But when I left home and realized I didn't really know how to cook very much, I needed one book that was going to teach me how to do everything. And I bought Joy of Cooking, and that was, 17 years ago, 18 years ago or something. Yeah, it's kind of wild. Megan, I had a kind of question that was based on something we talked about earlier with the Parmesan chicken recipe, where you're talking about finding the trouble of finding small chicken breasts for a recipe like that. Are there any other recipe writing quirks or things that you see in recipes sometimes that it's not really a red flag? It's just like maybe a little bit out of touch, or it makes you kind of question the recipe and have to immediately say like, okay, well, I'm clearly going to change that, or I'm not following that.
Yeah. Am I a terrible professional if I say there are a lot of times I find that and I don't follow the recipes? But I was thinking about when John was talking about the roasted chicken thighs that you had and how great it is to do, like you do them in one pan, you start them in a cold pan and it gets really crispy. I recently cooked a recipe from New York Times Cooking, a garlic braised chicken recipe. And you do all this work, right? You start in the cold pan, you get schmaltz all over your stovetop. But then for the braising section, you cover the pot and put the chicken in the oven with like more butter and white wine and a ton of garlic. And at the end, all that work of like the crisping the skin is for nothing because it never crisps up again. That's a big one for me. Like, you don't need to crisp the skin. Please don't ask me to do it.
Yeah, I feel like one of the things that we've started doing whenever there's a recipe we want to make that feels more of like a braise situation with the chicken, but it uses skin on, is that we'll take the skin off and actually just press it between two sheet pans in the oven and bake it kind of low and slow until it turns really crispy, and then just serve that as a garnish with the tender chicken.
I love that. I also wonder, could I have pulled off the crispy skin before sticking it in the braise and sort of done the same thing, like cut it up? Because it all got pulled apart and served over rice with a little cucumber salad anyway. So like, why not preserve the crispiness?
Yeah, that sounds actually a little bit more convenient than what we usually do.
Yeah, I mean, what we do is a little extra credit, but you don't have to do that. Yeah, or just, in a situation like that, maybe just go for the skinless chicken if it's not going to add a whole lot to the dish.
Exactly. Yeah.
I started doing pulling the skin off and just crisping it up separately because I also don't like the texture of like cooked skin in that sense. So I might as well enjoy it as a little crunchy topping instead. But
exactly.
It sounds like a chicken skin cracker in the best way.
Yeah. It's like, it reminds me, I'm going to say something controversial. I think it's better than bacon. It's so crunchy. It's like, I love a very, very audibly crunchy bacon, and often it fails to be that. And
it depends on the bacon.
John is like shaking his head no right now.
I'm not shaking my head.
I think it's better. I'm just gonna.
Not all bacon is created equal.
I still like bacon.
Some of it's a little bit better than chicken skin, I think.
Whatever.
I worry you just shared $1 million idea too, because where does all the skin go when you buy skinless?
Right.
Yeah.
Guys, someone could be like saving that and making chicken bacon, chicken
crackers. Yeah.
I also wanted to ask you, so your Instagram stories are probably my favorite of anybody's. They're just delightful. They're just really fun, and you do a lot of conversational things. But one recently that I loved so much was somebody had asked you a cooking question, which was like, how do I have a better attitude about cooking? I really hate cooking. I feel like I need to have a better attitude about it. And I loved your answer. Do you remember what you said?
I do. Well, first of all, thank you. I like being on Instagram maybe a little too much. And I'm always trying, like, as a content creator, trying not to get sucked into the algorithm and worrying about how things do and just have as much fun as possible. Like, if it's fun for me, hopefully it's fun for everyone else. Yes, it was actually my friend Olivia who recently did all my graphic design for my Substack. And she was like, what if I hate cooking? Like, what do I do? And I was like, be a hater. You don't have to like cooking to do it or to do it well. And if there's something particularly sticky that you don't love about the cooking process, because it's not just standing at the stove, right? Like it's deciding what you're going to eat. So you're
Yeah.
making a meal plan, or you're at least like making choices in the grocery store. You're grocery shopping. You have to put the food away. You have to do prep work before you even get to the cooking part of it. So like if you hate the meal planning, can you subscribe to like a meal planning newsletter or take someone else's meal plan, like which is what Dinner Tonight, my Substack series, is designed to do. Like, here are the things I cooked, take it and use it or do your own thing. Or if you hate the shopping, can you do like grocery pickup or can you get meal kits and everything else is done for you? The prep part is done for you. Or if you can't afford meal kits, can you buy the short, like the already chopped onions or the frozen prepped veggies so that you're eliminating the step that you like the least to make it a little bit easier on you, but like you can still hate it. I don't, not everyone finds joy in cooking, which is like probably the worst thing to say on the Joy of Cooking podcast.
That's blasphemous. I demand you take that back. No, I honestly think that Irma might have had her tongue maybe in her cheek a little bit when she came up with that title. I have nothing to back that up aside from the fact that she just had a good sense of humor.
Well, and she wasn't known for being a great cook, you know?
Oh, more blasphemy. No, she liked entertaining more than she liked cooking. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think she viewed cooking sometimes as a way of, it was like a necessity for, having people over to her house for, she hosted a lot of like women's circles, or like they would have a guest come speak about their book that they had written, and all these ladies would gather. And so she would make snacks. But I think for her, it was kind of a means to an end. And there was even a relative of Irma's that when she heard that Irma was coming out with a cookbook, she said something like, "But Irma's a terrible cook."
What do you think Irma would think about snack boards, particularly for Shannon, who just
Oh, she would love that. Yeah.
I think she would be on board.
Yeah. It would be like a low effort alternative to an aspic or something.
Well, I love to host too, right? So it's like the easiest way to put food out for guests. So I feel like I understand her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think her snack board would have had a lot of tiny sandwiches and canapes and probably oysters.
Oysters.
Yeah, there's a lot of oysters in those early editions.
Yeah, like a ton of them. I think it was like, her son Edgar was living in Seattle, and I know that she went to visit him a few times. And so perhaps that's why she...
Yeah, because Irma was in St. Louis, which is not a
in
place I think of as being a place you would get oysters, but...
But, just doing like some research on oysters back in the day, it is kind of crazy how popular oysters were, like in the most landlocked parts of the country. It's just amazing the more people didn't keel over.
Well, they were much more affordable then, right? Like
Right,
it was a very affordable food.
Yeah, but this is like before, widespread refrigeration. There was just like a lot of ice involved.
It's wild to think about. So, Meghan, your Substack newsletter that is all about, you have one about parenting, but you also have one about what you feed your family every week. And I was curious if you have any dinners that are on regular rotation that you make when you don't have a lot of time, or you're not going to feel like cooking a big dinner.
Yeah. Snack dinners are like the OG for my family, and they really love that when I can like pull bits and bobs either from the fridge and just throw things together like hummus and veggies and pepperoni or salami, or from the freezer. Occasionally we'll do like freezer dinner where it's like the Aldi finds that we write about often for Simply Recipes, or things I grab at Costco and like kind of heat those up in the air fryer and make that dinner without cleanup. Cleanup is a pain point for me in cooking. When my husband is home, he is in charge of cleanup, but he travels often for work. So I'm always trying to like get away with less cleanup. And then in 2024, the recipe I cooked the most for the nights when we had like soccer practice and homework and I was solo parenting is this like riff on beef and broccoli. And I actually wrote about it for Simply Recipes, where you just like brown a pound of ground beef and you season it. There's like hoisin and soy sauce and mirin, and you can add ginger and garlic, and then throw some broccoli in there to steam. And you can use soba noodles, you can use rice noodles, whatever suits your family. But I honestly use the like top ramen packets, like 3 of those for the 4 of us is plenty without the seasoning, obviously. And then I save the seasoning for popcorn. And then a lot of just pasta. My kids love pasta, tortellini. It could be plain butter noodles. It can be like pasta with Rao's jarred sauce. And we eat a lot of that with roasted or steamed broccoli because that's like one of the go-to veggies in our house. It's not very beautiful, but it's delicious and feeds us.
Yeah, the ramen beef broccoli thing sounds like something. I think we should try that.
And Megan, I know that you on your Instagram are often talking about your candy salads. So I was just curious about what inspired your candy salad and what got you into that.
Okay. Long before candy salad on Instagram used to be silly and like do reviews of new candies in my Instagram stories, I am obsessed with candy. I would love to own a candy shop at some like in my fantasy future. I don't really think that's going to happen. But I think that like all of the technology involved in making candy something that we think of as cheap and like for kids only is remarkable, and we should be like more excited about candy as adults as than we are, right? And you're like doing so much for your inner child by buying the candy that you couldn't have as a kid. And then candy salad was like a TikTok trend maybe a couple years ago, but I really latched onto it because it feels like if you ever went to like the Sweet Factory in the mall in the like 90s or 2000s, late 90s. Oh my God, I'm aging. I feel like I might be aging myself here, but and you could do like the pick a mix, like you got a bag and you take a little bit from each of the containers of your favorite. Candy salad feels like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it also feels like very low lift, high reward. Like you basically just shop for it and then you throw everything together and you can make things themed for holidays, which is really nice because my kids are a little bit older and some of the things we used to do for holidays, they're like, that's not cool anymore, Mom. I'm like, okay, well, I guess we'll just make candy salad about it.
I know my husband's throwing an Oscars party tonight. Today is the day of the Oscars. And I was like, if you think of any Oscar-inspired candy salad, let me know for sure.
Yeah. Could you go like all reds with a little bit of gold?
I was thinking gold. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, gold or like orange-ish.
Yeah.
Gold candies there are.
Yeah, I don't know.
Like things covered in foil, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. I was thinking of the Haribo makes like a lemon ginger chew, which is it's not like readily available in every grocery store, but that is kind of gold in color and really delicious and would feel kind of grown up too.
Yeah. A little classy.
Yeah. I wonder too about like popcorn salad which is a similar concept. You pop popcorn and then you add like a gummy candy, a chocolate candy. We did one for Thanksgiving that was inspired by Charlie Brown Thanksgiving with like jelly beans and toast and pretzels. But he could do something like that. So you don't have to find as many candies.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I feel like popcorn and Oscars is a natural pairing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great idea.
Maybe get some Swedish fish in there.
Oh,
with the
yeah.
red. Yeah. All right, Megan, where can our listeners follow you?
Yeah, I'm chronically online. My Substack is called Stir and Scribble, but you can find it at megansplawn.substack.com and on Instagram and Threads and TikTok, although I'm very rarely on TikTok. I am at Megan_Splawn. Of course, the sites I write for, like Simply Recipes and thekitchen.com occasionally.
Thank you. And your name, Megan, is spelled with an H, so it's Meghan.
I am an Meghan Megan.
Each week, we choose a topic to tackle based on caller suggestions. This week, we're talking about canned pumpkin.
Caller question. I have many cans of canned pumpkin taking up space in my pantry. Recipe ideas? Question mark.
There's a ton. Enjoy. We chose pumpkin biscuits, which is, we have a recipe for sweet potato biscuits, page 36 in the new edition, and you can easily substitute pumpkin puree. We actually, just to make sure, we did that.
Yeah, I did that yesterday. It works.
It works, but that will only get you that'll use what, a cup?
A cup, I think, of pumpkin.
Yeah. So, I think that if you have a lot to get rid of and you're really kind of in a hurry to do so, the pumpkin or butternut squash soup that's on page 105, very good. Megan didn't really want me to mention this because it's a bit of a pain, but ravioli filling. So yeah, 1 can of pumpkin and maybe 2 ounces of Parmesan and some grated Parmesan and some nutmeg. Just mix that all up, and it's a great ravioli filling. We were also thinking a less pain in the butt version would be cannelloni. So, you just take squares of fresh pasta and, you could pipe some of that filling in there. And then we also have a ricotta filling that I was thinking would be really good to pipe alongside it. But again, that's turning into a bit of an ordeal. What else? Pumpkin bread.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of options when you're thinking about baked goods. So basically, any baking recipe can be pumpkinified. So like we have pumpkin muffins, pancakes, waffles. You can use it in bread recipes. So like if you have a sandwich bread, you could replace part of the liquid with some pumpkin and it would give it a nice golden color. I also think we don't have a recipe for this specifically, but I love Thai pumpkin curry. And I was thinking that usually that has chunks of pumpkin in it, but not the way I'm talking about.
Okay.
You could mix the canned pumpkin with some, like red curry paste and coconut milk and to make like a sauce for other veggies. I think that would be really delicious. Megan, do you have any, other than your pumpkin biscuits, do you have any favorite ways of using canned pumpkin?
That's a great recipe. Its only failing is that it doesn't use up a large volume. There is a Starbucks copycat pumpkin loaf recipe on thekitchen.com from Grace Elkis that is really great, and it uses a whole can of pumpkin puree, which I feel like is major when you can use the whole can up. And then I've never tried it, but one of my favorite Joy recipes is it called the butter puff or the Doughnut Muffin, where it's kind of like a blank slate muffin and it gets tossed in butter and then cinnamon sugar coating. I wonder if you could put a little bit of pumpkin in there, and I feel like that would be so.
I don't see why not.
Yeah,
that would be
great.
really good.
I feel like you can always just spoon that extra stuff from the can and give it to your dog too.
True.
Oh, and
Good way to put it. Use it.
Also have to put in an honorable mention for the spiced pumpkin ice cream that's on page 843.
Oh yeah, that's delicious.
That's really good.
I would also use it. I think it would make a really good smoothie.
Yes,
actually.
you could freeze it like in ice cube trays, or do you guys know the brand Super Cubes? They make those great silicone freezer molds. That's one of my favorite things when we open up canned pumpkin is to just do whatever's left over and then future smoothies. So good.
Yeah, I love freezing things when you're not sure what you're going to do with it yet. That's such a good idea.
Yeah.
It's like, this is a problem for future me. I will put in, John doesn't like this as much as I like it, but for a little bit, I was making this mac and cheese that had butternut squash in the sauce. So it wasn't like chunks, it was the puree, and then you mix it into the cheese sauce. I think it's really good. John doesn't like it as much.
Jeez,
I know. I'm so curious.
must have said something really bad about it. I don't remember like disliking it, but you haven't made it again, so I must have said something
just
bad.
because I know you didn't. I mean, it wasn't that you hated it; you just didn't love it. And so there's a lot of things that we can make that we both love, so we don't make that anymore. But I thought it was good.
I'll give it another shot.
No, it's okay. It's really okay. It's okay. If you have a topic, ingredient, or joy story to share, call our hotline at 503-395-8858. Leave us a message or send us a text. We'd love to hear from you. Next week's question comes from our caller.
Hello, Joy of Cooking. What's the best way to cook dried beans? I've never done it before. Thank you.
Fun. I love beans. We'll talk about that on the show next week.
A lot of bean talk.
All right. What's everybody planning for this week? What are we cooking? What are we eating this week?
We have no plans on our calendar this week, and this is extremely rare in our household, and I'm so giddy and excited. I feel like I've been in kind of a dry spell cooking-wise just because we've been so busy, and so cooking has felt more like a chore, and I do feel like I need to kind of get my spark back a little bit, so I'm going to focus on that, and then the rain has returned, gave us that little false spring, so I'm going to by getting excited in the kitchen, I'm going to focus on garden planning. So I think that hopefully will lend to me being like excited about cooking again. I'm going to plant some potatoes and radishes and carrots because we can get that in the ground now. But I just need some inspiration. I need to focus on getting my joy back right now.
Back.
Yeah. What about you two?
Well, it looks like we're going to have a little bit more sunny weather, so I might just start up the grill. Especially considering that we might be cooking some beans this week. Yeah, maybe a carne asada. We have a really great marinade recipe for that. And yeah, anything else at work?
Oh, well, I looked ahead to our CSA box this week, which we'll get on Thursday, and we're getting a bunch of greens. So this is like the time of year when the greens start to really pour in. So we're going to get bok choy, spinach, and mustard greens. And I really want to make that Priya Krishna recipe for sag feta. So it's like sag paneer, but it uses cubes of feta instead of paneer. Which I've never tried it. It's been around for years, and it looks delicious.
And I'm sure it would be great with that. I mean, I don't think they're allowed to call it feta anymore, but the Bulgarian white cheese, I think it's called serene.
So good.
Is that, I might be mispronouncing that, but serene sounds nice because it is a very serene cheese.
It is serene.
We always have some of that in our fridge now, thanks to you too.
Yeah, it's like it's the feta that comes in I love the packaging because it's like a little tub with a sheep on the side, and the brand is Rhodopa.
Rhodopa is really good. Zergut is also very good.
Yeah, it's my favorite feta-ish cheese. What about you, Megan? What are you doing this week?
Oh, what am I doing this week? I'm like, I have my meal plan right in front of me. Actually, I'm really excited. I have Erin McDowell's weeknight focaccia. I think that's what she calls it in her book, Savory Baking, in the fridge right now to make alongside chicken saltimbocca. Am I saying that correctly? Saltimbocca?
I think you're right. I don't know Italian, so we're going to go with that.
Yes. And then this, what we call pizza salad, which has like pepperoncinis and radicchio, and it's very delightful. I'm really looking forward to that. And then a friend shared a recipe from Brock Your Body for this like crispy chicken thigh, orzo creamy lemon skillet. I think I'm getting the name of the recipe wrong, but I'm like very excited to eat that this week. We're deep in the spring soccer season, and so it is going to be one of those busy like bean and cheese burritos some nights from the freezer, or like real quick from canned beans, or the more like fun, like, luxurious things when I have the time.
I love the sound of everything. Can I just come over to your house?
Yeah. You know what's funny is I'm looking at your meal planning series on your Substack a lot because we just signed up for a CSA, and I'm like,
oh,
okay,
nice.
What are the strategies? How am I going to make the most of all of this? Because it's been a really long time since we did community supported agriculture near us, and I feel like the greens are coming my way too.
Yeah. I'm going to write some more about that, I think, because it does really change the way you cook. I like it because it makes decisions for me, and I don't have to figure out what vegetables I'm cooking. I just have to cook the ones I get.
Yeah, it's a challenge, but it also, it frees you from the tyranny of choice. Mm-hmm. I'll just say that like it's nothing.
I loved it.
Thanks for listening to the Joy of Cooking podcast. Before we go, show some love for your favorite podcast by subscribing to the show and leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts and iTunes. Follow us at joyofcooking.substack.com and on Instagram at thejoyofcooking. Stay tuned for next week where we will tackle beans, and don't forget to make this week's recipe pumpkin biscuits. Call in with questions, hopes, history, or where you find joy in the kitchen. Our number is 503-395-8858. That's 503-395-8858.
And we cannot do this without our fantastic team at the Joy of Creation production house. Thank you to Dave Drusky, our production coordinator, Haley Bowers, our audio engineer, and Sarah Marshall, our producer.